Sergeant Zachary Allen watched in horror as the Voxari soldiers executed their own wounded in cold blood, including a terrified young female named Yaksa. He knew he should walk away, that this wasn't his fight, but something deep inside compelled him to intervene. He couldn't just stand by and let innocent lives be snuffed out, enemy or not. Zachary burst into action, his pulse rifle crackling as he cut down the Voxari executioners with ruthless efficiency. In the chaos of the firefight, he scooped up Yaksa's limp body and carried her to safety, not fully comprehending the ramifications of his split-second decision. As he tended to Yaksa's wounds, Zachary discovered she was no ordinary Voxari. She possessed powerful psychic abilities that made her a prized asset in the brutal war raging across Zephyrus. The Voxari Empire wanted her back to weaponize her gifts, while Zachary's own superiors in the United Terran Forces saw her as a tool to finally defeat the alien menace. Caught between two ruthless factions, each determined to exploit Yaksa for their own ends, Zachary faced an impossible choice. Turn her over to UTF scientists to be studied like a lab rat, or protect her from both friend and foe alike. Before he could decide, a Voxari kill team tracked them down, led by cunning field commander Razar. Outnumbered and outgunned, Zachary went rogue, fleeing into the uncharted wilds of Zephyrus, with Yaksa in tow. Now, the unlikely duo must forge an alliance born of desperation if they hope to survive. Hunted by the Voxari, disavowed by the UTF, they'll brave hostile alien jungles and battle fearsome predators, all while unraveling the mystery of Yaksa's true purpose. But as Zachary grows closer to the enigmatic alien girl, he stumbles upon a horrifying secret. Yaksa is the key to an ancient Voxari doomsday weapon, one capable of exterminating entire star systems. With billions of lives hanging in the balance and time running out, Zachary vows to keep Yaksa safe at all costs. He'll take on the whole damn Voxari Empire if he has to. Anything to stop them from unleashing Armageddon across the galaxy. For in Yaksa, Zachary sees a spark of hope, a chance for a future free from the cycle of violence and hatred that's consumed both their species. But to get there, they'll first have to learn to trust each other and confront the demons lurking in both their pasts. Zachary's boots crunched against the gravel as he and Yaksa trudged through the unforgiving Zephyrian wildlands. The air hung heavy with moisture, the dense jungle foliage blocking out the sun's harsh rays. Days had bled into weeks since their fateful escape, and supplies had begun to run low. Zachary held up a hand, signaling for Yaksa to stop. "Hold up. Look over there." He pointed to a structure peeking out from beneath the overgrowth, its angular lines a stark contrast to the organic chaos surrounding them. Yaksa squinted, her violet eyes narrowing. "A Voxari outpost? Out here?" "Looks abandoned. Might be worth checking out for supplies." Zachary unslung his pulse rifle, the weight of it familiar in his hands. They approached cautiously, Zachary taking point while Yaksa watched their rear. The outpost's entrance yawned open like a gaping maw, darkness swallowing the interior. Zachary flicked on his rifle's mounted light, sweeping the beam across the room. The space opened up into a cavernous chamber, dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. Zachary moved deeper inside, his light glinting off strange Voxari artifacts and tech. He'd never seen anything like it before. Zachary stopped short when his light fell upon an object half buried beneath scattered debris. It looked like a data drive, its sleek metal casing covered in intricate alien glyphs. When he reached for it, Yaksa gasped. "Zachary, wait, I can feel something. A presence within the device calling to me." Zachary frowned. "What do you mean? Is it safe?" Yaksa stepped forward, placing her hand on the data drive. Her eyes fluttered shut, brows knitting in concentration. "It contains knowledge about my abilities and—" She trailed off, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A weapon. Something terrible, with the power to destroy worlds." Zachary's blood ran cold. "The doomsday weapon? The one the Voxari are after?" Yaksa nodded grimly. "This data drive holds the key. We can't let it fall into their hands." Zachary pocketed the device, his mind racing, If this was real, it changed everything. The UTF needed to know. Before he could speak, a shrill alarm pierced the air. Hidden lights flared to life, bathing them in pulsing crimson. Shit! Must have tripped a security system. We gotta move. Zachary grabbed Yaxa's hand, pulling her towards the exit. They were barely halfway across the room when the thunder of heavy footsteps filled the air. A Voxari patrol burst in, weapons drawn. Zachary reacted on instinct, his rifle snapping up as he squeezed the trigger. Plasma bolts seared the air, dropping two of the Voxari where they stood. He spun, dropping to one knee as return fire hissed past his head. Beside him, Yaxa let out a cry of rage. She thrust out her hands, eyes blazing with ethereal light. A shockwave rippled forth, slamming into the remaining Voxari soldiers. Their bodies crumpled like rag dolls, armor dented and crushed by an invisible force. Zachary stood shakily, ears ringing in the sudden silence. He turned to Yaxa, watching as she stared at her own trembling hands. Yaxa. I did that? Her voice was small, confusion and fear etched across her face. Zachary, what's happening to me? Zachary swallowed hard. I don't know, but I do know that I'll keep you safe, whatever it takes. He shouldered his rifle. Right now, we need to put some distance between us and this place. Hours later, hunkered down in a makeshift camp, Zachary pored over the contents of the data drive. The more he read, the deeper his sense of unease grew. Yaxa was no ordinary psychic. She'd been engineered, her DNA spliced and manipulated to create the ultimate weapon. If the Voxari got their hands on her, it would mean the end of everything. Zachary scrubbed a hand down his face. He needed help, someone who could make sense of all this. His thoughts turned to his old UTF contacts, informants seated deep in Voxari space. It was a desperate gamble, but what choice did they have? But Zachary's blood turned to ice in his veins when the comm unit in his pack crackled to life. He decrypted the transmission with shaking hands, a leaden weight settling in his gut as the message scrolled across the screen. The UTF had branded him a traitor. They wanted Yaxa dead or alive. Now they were fugitives from both sides, caught in the crosshairs of a conflict that threatened to tear the galaxy apart. Zachary looked to Yaxa, huddled by the flickering light of the campfire. Her eyes met his, wide and haunted. In that moment, he knew he would do anything to keep her from harm, to unravel the twisted secrets of her past, even if it meant taking on the whole damn universe to do it. Zachary and Yaxa stumbled through the dense Zephyrian jungle, exhaustion etched on their faces. The unforgiving terrain tore at their clothes and skin. Suddenly, Zachary held up a fist, signaling Yaxa to stop. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the foliage ahead. You see that? He whispered, pointing to a faint wisp of smoke rising above the tree line. Yaxa nodded, her violet eyes wide with apprehension. What do we do? We check it out carefully. They crept forward, Zachary's pulse rifle at the ready. As they neared the source of the smoke, voices drifted through the air. Human voices. Emerging into a small clearing, they found themselves face to face with a ragtag group of humans. Tents and makeshift shelters dotted the area. The inhabitants, dressed in a mix of civilian clothes and UTF uniform scraps, immediately raised their weapons. Hold it right there! A gruff voice called out. A scarred man with a salt and pepper beard stepped forward, leveling a battered plasma shotgun at Zachary's chest. Who the hell are you? Zachary slowly raised his hands. Easy there. I'm Sergeant Zachary Allen, and this is Yaxa. We're not here to cause trouble. The man's eyes narrowed, flicking between Zachary and Yaxa. UTF, huh? What's a UTF grunt doing out here with a Voxari? It's complicated, Zachary replied. Look, we've got information about a Voxari superweapon, something that could end the war, and a lot more. The man's expression didn't change, but a flicker of interest passed through his eyes. I'm Jax. This here's what's left of the 23rd Recon. At least, those of us smart enough to see this war for the bullshit it is. He lowered his weapon slightly. Let's hear about this super weapon of yours. Hours later, after Zachary had explained everything, Jack sat back, his face grim. Hell of a story, kid. If even half of it's true. A commotion at the edge of the camp cut him off. A young woman burst into the clearing, breathless. Jack's UTF strike team incoming. Shit, Jack spat. He turned to Zachary. Looks like your friends caught up with you. Before Zachary could respond, a voice boomed through a megaphone. This is Major Decker of the UTF Special Operations Division. We know you're harboring fugitives. Hand over Sergeant Allen and the Voxari female immediately. Jax's face hardened. Like hell we will. He turned to Zachary. There's a cave system about a click east of here. Head there. We'll buy you some time. You don't have to do this, Zachary protested. Jax grinned humorlessly. Sure we do. Now get moving. As Zachary and Yaxa sprinted for the cave entrance, the sound of plasma fire erupted behind them. They plunged into the darkness just as an explosion rocked the jungle. The caves were a maze of twisting passages and yawning chasms. Zachary's helmet light barely penetrated the inky blackness. They moved as quickly as they dared, the echoes of pursuit growing louder. There! Decker's voice rang out. After them! Zachary and Yaxa pressed on, hearts pounding. They rounded a corner and found themselves in a vast cavern. Stalagmites rose from the floor like jagged teeth. Yaxa, can you sense them? Zachary whispered. She closed her eyes, concentrating. Yes, they're close. Too close. Suddenly, a plasma bolt sizzled past Zachary's ear. He dove behind a rock formation, pulling Yaxa with him. Stay down! The cavern erupted in chaos. Plasma fire crisscrossed the darkness. Zachary returned fire, his shots finding their mark more often than not. But it wasn't enough. Decker's team was closing in. Zachary turned to Yaxa, desperation in his eyes. We need a miracle here. Yaxa's face set in dedication. She stood, eyes blazing with otherworldly light. Stay behind me. The air crackled with energy as Yaxa thrust out her hands. A wave of pure force slammed into Decker's team, sending them flying. Their screams echoed off the cavern walls as they were tossed about like rag dolls. When it was over, silence fell. Yaxa swayed on her feet, then collapsed. Zachary caught her before she hit the ground. Yaxa, are you okay? Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Zachary, I feel strange. He scooped her up in his arms. Hold on. I'll get us out of here. Zachary pressed on through the caves, Yaxa's semi-conscious form a dead weight in his arms. After what felt like hours, he saw a glimmer of light ahead. They emerged into the harsh Zephyrian sunlight, blinking against the sudden brightness. As Zachary's eyes adjusted, he froze. Before them stood a massive structure, its sleek lines a stark contrast to the surrounding jungle. Voxari glyphs adorned its walls. What is this place? Yaxa murmured, stirring in his arms. Zachary set her down gently. I don't know, but I think we're about to find out. They approached the facility cautiously. The entrance was unguarded, which set Zachary's nerves on edge. Inside, they found sterile laboratories and strange equipment. As they delved deeper, they came across holographic displays filled with information. Zachary's eyes widened as he read, Yaxa, this is about you, your creation, your abilities. It's all here. Yaxa stared at the screens, her face a mask of shock and horror. I'm engineered? A weapon? Before Zachary could respond, an alarm blared. Red lights began flashing throughout the facility. Intruder alert. Self-destruct sequence initiated, a robotic voice announced. Time to go. Zachary grabbed Yaxa's hand and they ran. They burst out of the facility just as the first explosions rocked the structure. Zachary pulled Yaxa behind a rocky outcropping as debris rained down around them. When the dust settled, Zachary peeked out, and his heart sank. A Voxari dropship hovered above them, its weapons trained on their position. Commander Razar's voice boomed from a speaker. Well done, humans. You've led us right to the prize. Now hand over the activation codes or face annihilation. Zachary looked at Yaksa, then at the data drive in his hand. The fate of countless worlds hung in the balance. He took a deep breath and stood, facing the Voxari forces. "You want the codes?" he called out. "Come and get them." Zachary stood his ground, pulse rifle trained on Commander Razar's hulking form. The Voxari's eyes gleamed with cruel intelligence as he surveyed the human and his Voxari companion. "The codes, Sergeant Allen, now," Razar's voice dripped with menace, "or I'll reduce this miserable planet to ash." Zachary's mind raced. He couldn't hand over the codes, but he needed to buy time. "You're bluffing," he said, injecting a note of skepticism into his voice. Even the Voxari wouldn't risk destroying a resource-rich world like Zephyrus. Razar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "You underestimate our willpower, human. The codes. Final warning." As Zachary opened his mouth to respond, he felt a feather-light touch in his mind. Yaksa's voice whispered in his thoughts. "Zachary, I have a plan. Keep him talking." Zachary suppressed a smile. "All right, Commander, let's talk terms. What's to stop you from killing us once you have the codes?" As Razar launched into a long-winded speech about Voxari honor, Zachary felt Yaksa's presence in his mind grow stronger. "On my signal," she communicated silently. "I'll hit them with everything I've got. You take out Razar." Zachary gave an imperceptible nod. He tensed, ready to spring into action. "Now!" Yaksa's mental shout coincided with a blast of psychic energy that sent the Voxari soldiers reeling. Zachary didn't hesitate. He hurled himself at Razar, catching the Voxari commander off guard. His fist connected with Razar's face, sending the alien stumbling backward. All around them, chaos erupted. Voxari troops fired wildly, their shots going wide as Yaksa's psychic assault scrambled their senses. Zachary used the confusion to his advantage, ducking and weaving through the melee. He spotted a Voxari shuttle nearby. "Yaksa! The ship!" They sprinted for the vessel, plasma bolts sizzling past them. Zachary laid down covering fire, his shots finding their marks with deadly accuracy. They were almost there when Razar's massive form loomed before them, blocking their path. "Enough games," the Voxari commander snarled. Zachary barely had time to raise his arms before Razar was on him. The Voxari's enhanced strength sent shockwaves of pain through Zachary's body with every blow. But Zachary had been through worse. He weathered the storm, looking for an opening. There! As Razar overextended on a punch, Zachary slipped inside his guard. He delivered a flurry of strikes to Razar's midsection, feeling ribs crack under his assault. Razar howled in pain and fury. He lashed out, catching Zachary with a backhand that sent him sprawling. As Zachary struggled to his feet, he saw Razar pull something from his belt. A detonator. "Surrender the codes," Razar wheezed, "or I'll blow us all to oblivion." Zachary froze, his blood running cold. He looked to Yaksa, saw the perseverance in her eyes. Before he could stop her, she thrust out her hands. Razar went rigid, his eyes bulging as Yaksa's psychic power tore into his mind. The detonator clattered to the ground, harmless. But the strain proved too much for Yaksa. She collapsed, blood trickling from her nose. "No!" Zachary rushed to her side, cradling her limp form. He looked up to see Razar's troops advancing, weapons raised. "The codes!" Razar gasped, clutching his head. "Now!" Zachary's shoulders slumped in defeat. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the data drive. "Here, take it." As Razar's forces retreated with their prize, Zachary held Yaksa close. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but I had to." "Shh, save your strength," Zachary urged. Yaksa managed a weak smile. "It's okay, I hid the real coordinates in your mind. They can't use the weapon without them." Relief washed over Zachary, tempered by the gravity of their situation. He gently lifted Yaksa, his teeth clenched with purpose. Somehow, he'd find a way to warn the UTF. Somehow, he'd stop Razar. The fate of the galactic realm depended on it. Zachary's hand trembled as he released the data drive into Razar's waiting claws. The Voxari commander's mandibles clicked in satisfaction as he turned to leave, his troops forming a protective phalanx around him. Yaksa, Zachary whispered, cradling her limp form. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and distant. I'm sorry, she breathed, her voice barely audible, but I had to. A sharp pain lanced through Zachary's skull. He winced, shaking his head to clear it. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Images flashed before his eyes, memories that weren't his own. The sterile labs where Yaksa was created. The agonizing experiments. The weight of a destiny she never asked for. Zachary staggered to his feet, Yaksa held tightly in his arms. He had to warn the UTF, had to stop Razar. But with each step, his thoughts grew more jumbled. Who was he? Sergeant Zachary Allen? Or was that just another lie? He trudged through the dense Zephyrian jungle, sweat pouring down his face. The foliage seemed to twist and writhe, taking on alien shapes. Yaksa's presence in his mind grew stronger, threatening to overwhelm him. After what felt like hours, or was it days? Zachary stumbled upon a UTF outpost. Hope surged within him, only to be brutally crushed as he took in the scene before him. Bodies littered the ground, UTF soldiers, their armor scorched and shattered. The stench of death hung heavy in the air. Zachary fell to his knees, retching. This was Razar's work, a preemptive strike to silence any opposition. He looked down at Yaksa, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Save her or protect the universe? The choice tore at him, made all the more agonizing by the fragments of her memories now embedded in his psyche. With a pained cry, Zachary rose once more. He had to press on, had to find a way to stop the weapon's activation. As he stumbled through the war-torn landscape, reality seemed to warp around him. One moment, he was Zachary Allen, UTF sergeant. The next, he was reliving Yaksa's tortured past. The sound of engines roared overhead. Zachary looked up, his eyes widening at the sight of a massive Voxari warship descending through the clouds. This was it, his last chance to make things right. Gently, he laid Yaksa's unconscious form behind a fallen tree. I'm sorry, he whispered, brushing a hand across her cheek, but I have to do this. Zachary crept towards the warship, his mind a maelstrom of fragmented thoughts and borrowed memories. He had to stop Razar, had to prevent the activation of the doomsday weapon, even if it cost him everything.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.